Is it cheesy? Yes. Full of blood, guts and gore? Of course. Is it a hell of a lot of fun? Yeah. So Renfield tells the story of Dracula and his servant Renfield, and how Renfield then tries to get out of the grasp of Dracula, who is a little bit of a narcissist. Let's just say that.
Okay, obviously we're dealing with a little bit more than just narcissism here.
First of all, let's go into the positives. The cinematography, especially in the action scenes, were brilliant. How it created this sort of eclectic and really colourful and almost like Tarantino-esque action scene that was so hyper gory, and the colours. A lot of it was done with really great hues of colour, which highlighted some of the horror aspects. It made it feel almost like an 80s horror film, which I was really surprised about. If you were also a fan of Nicolas Cage, who isn't, come on, except for maybe that one film, The Wicker Man, yeah, that was a bit of a problem. This is definitely Cage at his cagiest, and especially with him being Dracula of all characters, a character I didn't expect him to play.
Some call me the Dark One, others the Lord of Death. To most, I am Dracula.
I didn't expect him to be into this horrorscape, but I think he really enjoys it, and you can tell it in his performance. Yes, it's a little bit cheesy. Yes, it's a bit over the top. You know, he is an Academy Award winning actor, but he hasn't been in a great film for a long, long time. And I wouldn't say this is a great film, but I think it is something that you can really just watch and have a lot of fun with. Nicholas Hoult, who I'm a big fan of, I love him from Mad Max. Even back in the day when he did smaller films like Warm Bodies or certain things like that, and then he went into the X-Men. But Nicholas Hoult is brilliant. He always brings his A game, and it looks like he had a lot of fun as well. He can do no wrong. To get on to how the pace was in the film, it was fun and fast paced, and I think it filled it out with as much as it could with this horror and comedy. Focusing on the practical effects, especially on Nicolas Cage at certain portions of the film, I think was really fun. It was really impressive how they made him look at certain points, because we're dealing with Renfield trying to feed Dracula, bringing him back to full strength, and how we do that is we start off as a sort of skeletal form, and then it moves on to a fully formed Dracula, which I thought was really good. Now let's talk about Dracula. Dracula is such an iconic character. I've even got a tattoo of Dracula on my arm, to be fair.
I need to get out of a toxic relationship.
And it is such a rinsed and repeated sort of theme with Dracula. But I think the way that this movie does it, and the way that it uses the tropes of vampires, is actually really funny and quite creative, and that's what makes this so fun to watch. It references previous incarnations of Dracula, especially from the old Hammer horror films, and there's the Universal monster horror films, basically, that they reference quite a lot in this film towards the end and the start. And I think it was really good of them to do that, because it showed that they had a lot of love for previous incarnations of Dracula that have come before, such as Christopher Lee in his role. But that's all of the positives really for this film. I'm going to move on to the negatives, which there isn't a lot, but it does bring it down a peg for me, because for something that's so fun, it had these moments, these lulls in between that were just not as fun. There would be an action sequence, brilliant, with a bit of comedy, hyper violent. But then it would have these moments of just really slow story building. And why? Just why? I was sitting there on my seat going, when is this gonna build some steam to get to the next action sequence? And when the next action sequence came on, I was like, yes, this is brilliant. And you could feel almost like a dip in quality. And I don't know whether that's from me or not. And as Kaylin had mentioned after we came out of the film, there were a few parts that just didn't sit right with her. And I'll get into some of those now. The story of the film, very simple, very paper thin. There's a lot of side stories which he didn't really care for. Something to do with the police force and something to do with outside factors. There was a romantic story which didn't really, there was no chemistry, so it didn't really create this sort of feeling to it that there was any danger. You kind of knew where the story was going to go, and for that reason some story points just wasn't for me.
Bring in innocent victims. I want a handful of nuns, a busload of cheerleaders.
And I just want a normal life again.
The biggest, I think, negative that this film has is that it doesn't excel either at its horror aspects of the film or the comedy aspects of the film. And without excelling at both or either, it has this sort of losing battle. So that's basically the negatives of the film, and some of them are quite big for somebody being a horror fan, especially somebody who's a fan of Dracula films, because there's not a lot that you can do with the Dracula character these days. You know, it's kind of the same thing, and this movie does try to differentiate itself from those sorts of previous incarnations of Dracula, but it doesn't get to the point where this is an iconic version of Dracula. To be honest with you, I think this is a film that we will forget after seeing it, and that's a problem for a film. To me, when something is bad or something is good, those are two sides of the spectrum, and this sits right in the middle, and that's what I call a meh film. It's something that could have been so fast-paced, so well put together, so well structured, but there were a few things, especially with story, that let this movie down. And I think if those were done well, this movie would be received a lot better than it has. Looking to something that was mixed about the film, I'm very much a person that loves practical gore effects, and this movie uses a lot of CGI gore effects. I can see where they were going with it, as I said, about hyper violent and making it seem like, bloody hell, that's a lot of gore.
Did I watch you cut a guy with a decorative serving platter?
It's all in the wrist.
But it just doesn't get to the point where I'm like, this is real. It's just so over the top. It detracts away from some of the seriousness of the film and the story that they're trying to tell. But don't get me wrong, there is a lot of carnage candy in this.
Death scenes are always much more elaborate. More blood, more gore. Carnage, candy. Your core audience just expects it.
And a lot of it put a smile on my face. So I can't really take away from that. All in all, a good movie, not great. Similar to Pope's Exorcist, I give it a 3.5 out of 5. And I think it is a movie that you should watch. Maybe not spend your hard-earned money on it in the cinema, but be able to watch it at home. A lot of people will get a lot out of this film, and some people just won't. But it was a hell of a lot of fun, and it's nice to see Nicolas Cage doing something a little bit different again, and maybe improving on his old film, Vampire's Kiss, as well. I didn't mention that. I mentioned Wicker Man, but not Vampire's Kiss.
Me vampire!
That film, terrible. So that's me, guys, Johnny from Hangtime Horror, and there will be an Evil Dead Rise review coming soon, so keep your eyes locked onto the channel for that. Let's just say it was bloody good fun. And remember, guys, stay spooky.
Let's eat.